Hi, welcome to MamaFuel. My name is Anne Ferguson. I am your host, and I'm thrilled to bring you this podcast that was created to fuel every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully spark a dream or two along the way. My mission is to change the way that we mamas treat ourselves and each other so that we feel better, live happier lives, and change the world one happier family at a time. In the MamaFuel podcast, I'm sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with amazing mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of being a gorgeous woman shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. You are amazing, and I cannot wait to share this conversation with you. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. My name is Anne Ferguson, and I am delighted to be spending some more time, if you're a repeat listener, or for the first time, some time in your ears, your heart, and your soul, particularly because my companion on this inner journey with you today is a woman who is a force of nature and who I met in a room full of 600 other bright, incredibly sparky souls, and she stood out like there was a spotlight on her. Her name is Alissa Daire Nelson, and she, over the last almost year, has become a friend, a client, and a woman who I admire immensely. So I'm thrilled, Alissa, to have you join us. Thank you for coming and being my guest on MamaFuel.
It is truly a pleasure. I'm so happy to be spending the next, however long the spirit carries us with this interview. We were chatting a little bit beforehand and saying this could be 30 hours. We
totally.
You, it will not be 30 hours, but it could be.
Because life, right? But
right.
Yes, it absolutely could be hours and hours. So let's start in the place that I always like to start with my guests as a way of providing some context to what your life looks like right now and what your journey was like into motherhood. So let's start with the first one, which is tell us what your life looks like right now in the context of family and so on.
Well, I love my family. I had the opportunity to meet somebody new over the weekend, and I got to tell her my story. And I finished with it, and I said, gosh, thank you so much for giving me space to tell that story, because I love my story, because I love my life. Like, it's one of those, wow, this would be, to me, it's a great movie, right? Because it's my personal journey. So how my life looks right now is I'm married to the man of my dreams, who is my second and last husband. His name is Joel, and we've been married for about 6 years. I am the very proud mother to two beautiful girls, Annika, who is 11, and Avery, who just turned 13. And it really is incredible. It really is incredible. And because this is a show all about parenting and being the best mama, my girl's father is also local to us and is very involved. And I'm blessed to say that he and I have become really good friends. And so that's just another piece of the story that I'm not only proud of, but just so grateful for, that he is so involved. And my beautiful girls get 3 parents. They get a bonus dad. And so it really is a giant blessing. So that's where life is right now.
And then tell us about your introduction into motherhood. What was it like for you to become a mama?
Oh, I always knew I wanted to be a mom, and I don't think that that's the case for everybody, but I was just like, I'm a type A personality. So I was like, all right, when is this going to happen? How do I need to line up all my ducks so that I can make it happen? And so I remember when my daughter's, my ex-husband, and I decided, all right, this is when we're going to start trying, and knowing that we didn't have any control over whether we would actually conceive when we began, quote, trying. And within a month of coming off the birth control pill, I was pregnant. And it was funny because I'd studied, like what happens and, when you ovulate and the implantation of the egg and the blah, 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 blah. And so I knew what was happening in my body the entire way. So I knew I was pregnant before I knew I was pregnant. And so that was amazing. My body apparently is only built to be pregnant for 8 months. So I had Avery, my water broke when I was just over 36 weeks. And so she was born just a tiny little peanut. She was 5 pounds, 6 ounces. And that was, but she was healthy, and she was able to breathe on her own and all of that. But she had to have some difficulty maintaining her body temp when we got her home. So there was some fear in that with that first baby. And then, 7 months later, I was like, gosh, I'm tired. My face is breaking out, and I just need to, clearly I need to get back on the birth control pill. So I called my OB, and I was like, all right, I just need to, if you can prescribe me the birth control pill, that'd be great. I just need to get back on. I need to get regulated. She's like, you need to take a pregnancy test. I was like, no, I don't. She's like, you sure do. So I was like, fine, I'll take your negative pregnancy test. And, and proceeded to fall asleep on the couch. Woke up at like 11 o'clock at night, and I was like, oh, fine, I'll go take this stupid test. And that thing blinked once, and it said pregnant. And it turns out I was already 10 weeks along with Annika.
Wow.
No, I'm getting that wrong. Avery was 9 months old when that happened. So when Annika was born, here they are 17 months apart. And so it was one of those things where the first one was so planned. And the second was like, oh my gosh, I skipped my first trimester because I just didn't have any idea. And so I remember going for my first appointment with Annika. I was like, I just don't know how this happened. She goes, I'm pretty sure you know how this happened.
And you were a nurse, right? So you really
yeah. Well, and at that time I was a dietitian, and then I became a nurse after both girls were born. But yeah, it was super funny. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Having them so close. The first couple of years were tough. I am a communicator by nature. I love to talk. And so having these two little beautiful humans, but nonverbal humans, was a real challenge. So we did as much sign language as we could. But man, did I start really falling in love with motherhood when they both could talk.
Yeah, I can imagine. And they somehow, be it by whatever convergence of fates and delight and your parenting and their personalities, have grown as the best of friends, haven't they?
Yeah, they really are. Their Instagram feeds are private, so you can't see them. But if you were able to see their Instagram feeds, they have pictures of them hugging and, face to face and arms around each other, and they call each other their best friends. And of course, they have other friends, but and they fight sometimes too. And Avery, being the older one, sometimes does that older sibling thing where she really gets on Annika, and then we have to kind of step in and say, that's not respectful. You wouldn't want that done to you, etc. But they really do, and their personalities are totally different too. So that they've become this best of friends is so wonderful. And they're the same size, so they share clothes, and it's adorable. And I feel really, really blessed because I was never that close with my sisters. I have 3 of them. And I'm now closest to my youngest sister, who is 5 years younger than me. But we were never close growing up. So it's just a totally different experience than my childhood. And it just makes my heart sing to see them like that. Yeah.
I can imagine, as the mama of, I thought mine were close together at 23 months. And they were. It was intense for those first few years. But we do not have a situation of near constant sibling harmony in our house. We are more working with all kinds of dynamics for lots of reasons, to do with probably Carolina's dyslexia, which she talked about on the podcast when she was my guest in an earlier episode, to do with, conversely, her sister's incredible facility at school, to do with their different personalities, to do with all kinds of things, and probably the way that I was with them, and different things have happened in the personalities they were born with and the karma they came in with into this life. It all contributes. And I think it's really beautiful in those moments when it can happen. So I wanted to just say that for anyone listening who might be listening to you and having those pangs of longing for that kind of a scenario, that it's a completely normal scenario to have that. And it's also completely normal to not have that because, and also it's not up to us, right? Like I'm pretty sure most mothers would sign up to have their kids, smushing their faces together on Instagram and being each other's best buddies. And not a lot of us would sign up for our kids to be fighting with each other and disagreeing. Yeah. So it's if you're listening and it's not your reality, it's not about you or your parenting or you not doing things enough. And it's not conversely about you, Alissa. And I mean, it's obviously a contributing factor, but it's down to the kids and what they decide. A friend of mine said to me once, she has 3 girls, and she said to me, basically, it's down to the oldest one deciding whether or not she feels accepting of this little being very early, and if she's willing to share the space, and if she's accepting of that person. In her case, she has girls too.
I do think there's ways that you can begin to craft that kind of relationship by what you focus on. The saying goes that you will get more of what you focus on. And it's really easy to get sucked into, God, they're fighting again. Right? And let me tell you, like we absolutely have moments. Like, let me make sure that the picture isn't painted that there is like glorious harmony all the time. In fact, I mean, they're 11 and 13. And so they have changes going on in their bodies. And that includes hormonal shifts. And so we have a lot of that. But we really are intentional about focusing on when it's good. And so our questions at the end of the day and our time when we're sitting on the couch and just chatting or when we're even watching a movie, it's always focused on what's good. So yes, we deal with the bossy older sister when that comes out, and we deal with it in that moment, and then we let it go and we focus on what's good. And so, while I'm talking about all of the positive things, it's because I choose not to focus on the bad things, and like them fighting for mirror space in the bathroom in the morning. They share a bathroom, and that's a real thing. So it's a yes and. Right? Like we really can be intentionally focused on how, when was the last time that you guys got along really well? What about that situation, and how you showed up? Like what was good about that? And when we begin to ask questions like that, it helps them to see, oh yeah, I want to do more of that instead of less of something else. And so it feels more abundant, and it feels more and feels less restrictive, and it feels and that also helps with forming their what's good about them. Like, oh, I'm getting in trouble again because I just can't do anything right, and I'm voicing my opinion. Avery is I'm speaking. Annika is our quieter child, right? So she often doesn't get in trouble because she just zips it, and Avery will come back and come back and come back to get her voice heard. And so I told her one day, she said, well, Annika never gets in trouble. And I was like, well, let me tell you this. So picture like a cute little puppy who chews on a shoe. She's like, got it. I'm like, that puppy's going to get in trouble, right? For chewing on the shoe and reprimanded. Yes. She goes, yes. And I said, okay, now picture that the puppy's chewing on a shoe. And as soon as the owner of the puppy starts to talk, go at the puppy and give the consequence or whatnot, that a tiger comes out of nowhere and attacks the puppy. Who's going to get the attention? She's like, the tiger. And the tiger. I said, so Avery, when you come in as almost the secondary parent to come in and attack Annika for whatever she might be doing, the focus immediately changes to you, shifts to you because of how you're behaving towards her. And it was like, oh, I get it. Right. And so we kind of had a good laugh about the whole metaphor, and we kind of giggle and call her little tiger now. But that's the kind of thing. So it's like, what about this situation felt unfair to you? Like, let's talk about it. And so we debrief a lot in our house, so that we can find the good and also go, what is a strategy that we can figure out? So if Avery and her jumping in, we instruct her to literally, like pinch her leg or do something, take 3 deep breaths so that she can pause before she jumps in. because she just that's one of her tendencies. And
we can all stand to do that.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
All of us.
And so then we turn it and go, now how can that be a strength? Because our strengths, so often get overused and they become our weaknesses. But let's look at how this is actually a really good part of you. It just happens to not be, used in the right way.
Harnessing it.
Exactly. Harnessing it and redirecting it and knowing the right times to implement it. Right? Like on the playground, when there's a kid getting bullied, they don't in their middle school now, so they don't have a playground, but you get what I'm saying. Like that's the time that you can use that tiger. Like you go for it and I'll support you 100%. And so we have a lot of those conversations. And again, as I said, like the first 3 years were tough when they couldn't talk. This is why I love like every piece of my parenting journey now, because everything we do, we can talk it out. And I've heard a lot of parents say, "Well, gosh, my kids won't talk to me," which I know is a challenge. So I'm actually writing a book about this exact thing right now, because it's so vital to have that communication from both sides. But the girls know that they will always have a voice in this home, and so that when they speak, we are actually listening, and we're not just waiting for our turn to tell them they're wrong.
And have you always? I mean, did you just land like a fairy on the natural parenting earth and step forth in bestowing your great questions, or is this? How did you get to this point where you're asking these questions? Because anytime I talk to anyone, I learn things, and like you, I have a passion for learning and for improving myself and for fine-tuning the ways that I do things and reflecting. But it's in the heat of the moment. It can be challenging. So how did you, and your husband has these bonus kids and who suddenly, he didn't get them when they were newborn. He got them when they were partially cooked, and they're still cooking. And so you guys are, the three of you are parenting. And how did you come to this place of asking all the questions and doing the debriefs and doing all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a lot of grace, a lot of radical, I call it radical responsibility, just recognizing that I have made so many mistakes. And this is
preach, sister.
I'm grateful about the mistakes because it gives me the opportunity to model to them what you do when you screw up. Right? Like, you know what? In the heat of that moment, like I lost it. And let me tell you, like there are times where I just go 0 to 60. Because I have triggers too, right? I'm human. I have triggers too. And so, I am not Zen, let me tell you. But in that moment, then I can go back and say, wow, this is what was going on inside of me. And so really being aware of what those feelings are inside of me. And this was a trigger for me. And I think it's because of something that might have happened here. And we kind of just talk it out. But the best part about it is I get to say, I'm sorry. I didn't treat you with the respect that is our value here in this home. And I don't often say here in this home, but you're following me. And so it's not okay. And my behavior was not okay. So then the place that this started was early on, with being, and it was probably, I think Avery must have been about 3.5, and Annika was maybe 2, but she just still wasn't steady on her feet. And Avery did something big sisterish. She pushed her, shoved her, smacked her, or something. And but it was physical violence. Like she put her hands on her. And what did I do? I smacked her upside the head. And it was just it was a really pinnacle moment for me, because I realized that here I was disciplining her. I'm putting that in air quotes because that's punishment. That's not discipline. For hitting her sister by hitting her. I just thought, what hypocrisy, and what am I modeling? I'm modeling that if you want control over somebody, that you just make sure that you're bigger than them. And are stronger than them. And then you can use physical force. So I immediately crumpled to the floor and bawled my eyes out and held them both tight. And I said to myself, I don't have enough tools. Like I ran out of tools, and that's why I used the anger. I didn't know what else to do. And I really, truly believe that parents are trying and they're doing the best they can with the tools they have. And so all of a sudden I had this compassion towards even abuse, and not that abuse is okay. It's never, ever okay. Let me be really clear about that. And I actually have the belief that it's never okay to put your hands on your child, which I know is controversial, but I just don't believe that that's necessary. And so I thought, when we run out of tools, we use our anger and we use our physical force as the tool. So what can I do to get more tools? And I found this book called Scream-Free Parenting by a gentleman named Hal Runkle. Excellent book. And the mantra that I got out of that book, and I read this book now, almost a decade ago, is we are not responsible for our children, we're responsible to them. And so that's when I realized I have to be not only the example of good behavior, but the example of what you do when your behavior is not so good. And in every situation, how can I model to them what I wish for them how I wish for them to behave? And that was really pivotal. So that started putting tools in my tool belt, as it were, to figure out like, okay, if this were them, how would I want them to behave? And then I have to model that behavior. And so, what it means to not be responsible for your kids is if they're tantruming in the middle of the supermarket or in the middle of Target, you're not responsible for that exact behavior, right? But you are responsible to behave in a way that is honoring to the people around you, right? And that also shows them what to expect next time, right? So, if that happens, I and it's happened to me before. Like I think it's happened to all of us. I've taken my children out into the entryway in between. I live in Minnesota, so there's
not outside in the cold,
hot, right? And so not wanting to go out there, and you hear parents that are like, "Well, we just left." Well, I needed to shop. Like I needed to get things at the store. That's why we were there. And so I just waited in that entryway and said, when you're finished with this, we'll go back in and we're gonna shop because we have to get these things accomplished. But I wasn't gonna buy their good behavior because that only reinforces that, hey, the bigger tantrum I throw, the more I get what I want. And I also wasn't gonna give into what I needed in that situation, which was to get the shopping done. And so, but it's hard to maintain your composure because you are embarrassed. We want our children to be these perfect models of perfect behavior. And you get the dirty looks. And did I get dirty looks that day as people were walking into the store. And I'm like, sorry, like I'm not going to bring it into the store, but I'm also not going to stand out in 10-degree weather. And it was embarrassing, but I also kept my cool. I didn't behave in a way that I would be embarrassed about. And I let them have their moment and also made sure that they knew that wasn't going to be acceptable, for us to be shopping with that kind of behavior going on. And they were little. And it was both of them. God, it was so, I just remember this day like it was yesterday. It was bad.
The things that are engraved in the brain and the experiential memory that stay forever. Yeah. You said something that tweaked a thought for me, which was that you also wanted to make sure that you were taking care of your need. And I'd like to go back to a different time that you've referenced in our conversations that we've had over the year, which is that you had, you were married, you had your kids, and then your family changed shape. And you were a single mom, and now you have, the man of your dreams, and you have this differently shaped family again. Can you talk to us a little bit about that process of starting over, of having the quote, white picket fence, 4.2 people in the house, or however, whatever the calculation is, 2 adults and 2.2 children and a dog and whatever. Mm-hmm. How was that for you, of going from, the traditional family model to being on your own with a couple of kids who were little? and then to being trusting again, and to start from scratch, both.
Yeah.
And you did it in a couple of areas, that, at least that I know of, one of which is career. So you went from being a dietitian to being a registered nurse to then being a coach, and you work in all kinds of different areas. You work in business, you work in parenting. So you've got this starting over thing down, but it doesn't mean that it was always comfortable and easy. So can you talk to us a little bit about what starting over, the place that starting over has taken in your life, and how you've gone through that gracefully?
Oh boy. Well, it's always messy. And I think accepting the mess is the key. And as I mentioned, I'm a type A personality. I also tend to be a little bit of a control freak, because I like things how I like my things. And so letting go and letting the universe actually do its work and allowing that flow, that has been a very long process for me. And so I'm still learning, and if I ever think I have all the answers, then I know I'm wrong, right? Like, so this is all a process. But I really try to step aside and let whatever is going to emerge. And that sounds like I've somehow like transformed and evolved into something. Like, it's messy because it's a very active process where I have to go, step back. This isn't how I planned it to go, or I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening next. And not knowing what's happening next, I think, is a very scary thing for most people. If you're one of those people who's like, I don't know what's happening next, and it's great. Like, I applaud you, and I would love to sit at your feet and listen for about 4 hours, because it's really difficult. And so, there was this confidence when I divorced, that I would find love again. So I wasn't so deeply scarred that I didn't think that it existed. But I did go through a lot of counseling, and that was really important. And I won't bore you with the entire story. It's actually a really good story about how my husband and I met. But I ended up divorcing and then being remarried with, about 2.5 years later. And so that was a real blessing that I was able to find true love in a way that, so quickly after divorce. But it had a lot to do with counseling. And what I also recognized was that I had to take 100% responsibility for that divorce in order to walk into the next marriage better, for lack of a better term, a better version of me. Because you see a lot of blaming, and it's his fault, or it's her fault, or if this hadn't happened, or blah, 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 blah. But the fact of the matter is that no matter what, both parties contributed to the demise of the marriage. And that includes when there is an affair. And again, I'm not saying that adultery is okay. You walked into the marriage with a mutual agreement that you'd be committed to one another. So I'm not saying that behavior is okay. But when we can go, how did I contribute to this? Both good and bad. It allows you to actually grow. And what I learned out of that, because our marriage, there was nothing that blew up. It just sort of fizzled and died, and was replaced by resentment and apathy instead of love. And so that was really hard. So we were walking through this household with, like, we were not even really partners. It was just like, there was contempt, and there was resentment, and there was apathy was the biggest thing. I didn't care. And which didn't mean I didn't honor my commitments there, but, and I didn't want to be in a marriage like that. Now, I've often asked, if I knew then what I knew now, would we have ever gotten divorced? And the fact is, I have no idea. And it doesn't matter, because that's not how it went. And he's got this beautiful son now, and no one, including me, would replace him for the world. Like, he's just this glorious little boy. And I wouldn't have Joel, which I wouldn't replace for the world. But that was the thing, is I realized, 40% of all first marriages fail. 60% of all second marriages fail. 75% of all third marriages fail.
Wow.
with that statistic, I went, the problem isn't the other person. Because everybody who walks into a second marriage, their divorce rate is much higher, and the third is much, much higher. So how do I take full responsibility so I'm not a statistic?
Yeah.
Or
you want to be on the right side of that statistic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, what is the true work of a marriage? Because our marriage just died. It wasn't date night on a Friday night where we went and, had dinner at Red Lobster and talked about the kids. Like, that wasn't the work of a marriage. But that's what I've been taught. And so what is that work? And so what I realized was that every single day I need to show up and go, how can I lift and honor my spouse today? And so that is my daily question. How can I lift and honor my spouse today? And so when I show up like that for Joel, it's natural for him to reciprocate. And yes, it absolutely takes two to tango like that. I think that you can give and you can give and you can give and you can give. And if the other person is so self-centered that they don't ever give back, that's a big challenge. And I don't have an answer to that. I don't have an answer as to whether that's something you can fix or not fix. So I'm just really sharing my experience. And so that's how I was able to show up in my second marriage, and have this thing that grows every single day. And to be honest, I didn't know that kind of relationship truly existed. And I remember having a conversation with Joel before we got married, where I was like, there doesn't seem to be fire here. Like, and this was fairly early on in our dating. And I realized later that I also had this like titanium wall around my heart where I was just not letting anybody in because I was strong. And so it was really easy for me to date and then disconnect and date and disconnect and whatever. And so I was like, when you kiss me, I don't feel that in my toes, and I want to feel it in my toes. Like, what does this look like in 5 years? If that's how it is now. But he was such a good guy. And I was just like, I want this to be the one, but am I wanting it to be the one because I want to like check it off the list, right? A list checker, or because he is the one and somehow I'm just not letting him in or something. And he looked at me and he said, well, I believe that a relationship can grow. And I literally laughed out loud because I did not think that existed. And what's true is that it does grow every single day. But the knight in shining armor moment when I finally let that titanium wall down was actually when I was on a trip to Mexico with some girlfriends of mine, and we Skyped. This is back before Zoom, and when we Skyped, and I couldn't get my audio to work, and he remoted into my computer from Minnesota and fixed my settings so that my audio worked. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm in love with this man.
Because you can do the tech stuff.
That was like my knight in shining armor moment. And it was then that I let that wall down. And I came home from that trip and he kissed me at curbside at the airport. He picked me up and I felt it in my toes. And I was like, and so what I realized was the reason I wasn't feeling it in my toes is because I was so walled up, I wasn't letting him in. And so in order to step into that relationship for real, I had to let that wall down. And I didn't even know that wall was there. Right. And so, just kind of always a student of what's going on inside of me and how can I show up better.
Which must be, I would imagine, a great gift for your children. And I see, certainly in the conversations that I have with my parenting coach, Leslie Potter, who is an early guest on the podcast, and who I frequently reference for those of you who have listened to multiple episodes. And she and I often talk about how I want to show up for myself, first of all, and how I want to show up for my kids and give everybody that space to grow in their own way. So you're describing your growth within relationships, romantic relationships, and also as a parent. And one of the areas where I think that has probably served you and your kids really well is around a particular situation that you have at home, which is that you have one of your girls with a chronic illness. And you and I have had conversations before about that dance of minding this wannabe pro athlete, because both your girls are gymnasts and they do incredible things and with sometimes pretty severe concussions and big consequences we've seen over the last year. And at the same time, one of your girls has diabetes and is learning to manage her own insulin and learning all of that stuff. And you're learning to manage the balance between being a registered nurse and knowing how to take care of her and all of that stuff, yet giving her enough space to grow and evolve and practice on her own. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like, that dance of, I want to keep you safe, and also the whole world is out there waiting for you and you need to learn how to navigate it. How do you support her in her illness?
Yeah, so Avery has type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease, and it's often very confused with type 2 diabetes, which has also a lot of genetic components to it. In fact, it's more genetically aligned or related than type 1, which is interesting, but has more lifestyle components related to it. So with type 1, your pancreas kind of shuts down. So it's the beta islet cells, in case anyone's interested in the particulars, that your immune system attacks. And so your body literally stops secreting and creating insulin. And so she is insulin dependent until there is a cure. And so if she doesn't have insulin, she dies. Bing. Like, just kind of that simple.
Pretty straightforward and horrifying.
And if she takes too much insulin, she dies. And so it's this interesting dance because while she is totally normal and everything is fine and she's perfectly healthy, we could misstep, and she could either land in the ICU or worse. And so it's this interesting, it's no big deal and it's a huge deal all at the same time. But we decided very early on as a family that this thing wasn't going to control us. It is something that she has, but it doesn't define her. And so, very early, I always want to prepare my kids for being able to take care of themselves if I'm not there. Right. So really focusing on integrity, really focusing on, how would you manage this if I wasn't here to help you? And so I try as best as I can, although it is easy to jump in and just give the answer to like, hey, how would you handle this? What do you think? And so, we had Avery, we offered Avery to let her give her first injection in the hospital less than 12 hours after her diagnosis. And she's like, yeah, okay. And, part of that was her bravery, but part of it was also how we framed it. We're like, this is no big deal. You are totally capable of this. And so, give it a shot. We're all here to support you if give it a shot. If it doesn't go quite right, but just, give it a crack. And so she did. And so from the beginning, she has really stepped up to say, this is my body. And we encourage that, like, this is your body. What do you want to do? And so when the decision about whether to stay on multiple injections a day or to go to a pump, that was up to her. And I highly encouraged it because I knew how much easier it would make her life. We chose a pump and it wasn't the right one. She is allergic to the adhesive and it was a real hassle. And she made the decision to go back to multiple daily injections with the insulin. And so there's less control that you have because you can't just, type it into your machine and it gives you the insulin. And so I said, okay, well, this is your body. So if this is what you want to do, that's okay. These are the pros and the cons. And this is how we as a family are going to have to handle it then. And so she made that decision. And that was, she was diagnosed at age 9. We got a pump very closely thereafter. And so she was 10 and a half-ish. And we truly empowered her to make the decision about what was best for her with the guidance and, of the adults around her. So it wasn't like, oh, figure it out, kid. Let us know what you want to do. There was lots of conversation around that. And fast forward, she now is a certified babysitter. And just last weekend, she babysat a 5-year-old type 1 diabetic who, was diagnosed just a few months ago. Right. So she can do that because she had her made this cute little video. Both girls are certified babysitters and had to make these cute little videos with their intro. And so Avery's video, it was about a minute long and it included, just by the way, I have type 1 diabetes. And while a lot of people see this as a bad thing, I actually see it as a good thing. It's made me more mature. It's made me, I mean, and every time I watch that video, and I've probably watched it 120 times, I cry because taken this negative thing, right? And she's turned it into a positive. And because life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And so we're always reminding each other of that in the house, right? In our home is life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. So how can you use this thing, which is a negative thing? Like, I wouldn't wish type 1 on anybody. People ask, so is it controlled? It's never controlled. It's like, it changes all the time. And then you add in, puberty and hormones. And I mean, it's never controlled. It's never the same thing 2 days in a row. But it happens for us. So how can we use that to empower her to make better choices? And so we will ask those questions like, what do you think the good parts of this have been? She's like, oh my gosh, I know so much more about nutrition and food and making choices. And I know how to measure, and I know how, like, all of these wonderful lessons that came out of that diagnosis, and her compassion for other people who, might have anything from eczema to, Crohn's disease to, some of these other conditions, epilepsy or seizures. Like, she understands from an empathetic point of view now, not just compassion or sympathy. Like, hey, I get it. It's hard. You want to talk about it, right? So she, even at 13, can show up as such a different human for other people who are going through difficult things. And like, it's astounding to see her do that. And like, as a mom, I'm so proud of her for making the decision, because I couldn't force that decision on her to handle it this way, right? I can encourage it, I can frame it, I can ask the right questions, but I can't force her. Like, that is all her showing up as the human she is. And so I just make sure to call that out all the time. Like, and just look at her and say, I am so proud of the human being that you are. And to see that light up her self-esteem and, and the pride by which she carries herself. And not the negative kind of pride, but the internal confidence kind of pride is just really, really, really beautiful.
I love that. And I want to also honor the container that you have created with her two dads to have this opportunity to trust her knowing. And it's something that I talk often about with Leslie, because as a fellow type A absolute control freak, who lifelong fooled myself into thinking that I could control things, but we don't have any control over anything. None of it. There's no control over any of the things. And we exhaust ourselves chasing something that doesn't exist. So I can, and as a person who has lived with anxiety a lot, having a child with a chronic condition, which is very easily life-threatening, you could go all kinds of different ways with that. And yet what I feel from you is really strength and rooted acceptance of this is how it is and this is how we're handling it, and a trusting that the universe is there supporting you and supporting Avery, and that she's got this, you've got this, and she's got this, and you're not just paying lip service to the you've got this. And I just really want to honor that, because I can imagine that might not be easy.
Yeah. It's, we're a part of some support groups on Facebook, with type 1 parents. And we see this a lot where the parents won't let their kids go for sleepovers. And I don't know how I'm going to handle when she goes away to college. I think, diabetes aside, it's going to be really hard for me, because I just love being in the space of my kids. But that they're just terrified. They are literally gripped with fear at all times, because, tomorrow she could die, tomorrow he could die. And these things do happen. But if we allowed ourselves to be gripped with fear all the time, we would lose out on the amazing present.
Yes.
And so, yes, it's a choice to release the fear. And along with that, I do believe fear actually has a very healthy role in our lives. I always tell my clients, okay, so if you're afraid of something, let's have a conversation with fear. Because sometimes fear is telling you something very real. If it's speaking, like I'm so afraid of being up in front of this, group of 100 people talking. Okay, well, why would you be afraid of that? Well, what if I don't say the right words, or what if I don't? Oh, my phone just started going off. I think I woke Siri up. Anyway, what if I don't say the right words? Okay, well, how can you prepare for that? Oh, well, there's a confidence screen. I can make sure that there's stuff up on there. Great. Or I can have note cards, right? So when fear comes up, it's like, how can we prepare for that so that it doesn't have to grip us? And so, yes, we have a continuous glucose monitor, which helps us to know what our blood sugars are doing in between the checks. And that's great. So we use technology, and we're so grateful for the technology. I mean, insulin itself, exogenous insulin, was only invented 100 years ago. Like literally, it was 1921. Like before 1921, type 1 diabetes was literally a death sentence. And the advances that we've had since then, like we are so blessed. We don't have a cure, but we are so blessed to be in a space where we've got this amazing technology available to us, and that we have insurance coverage that covers that stuff, because these pumps are $5-6 grand. And we've got insurance that can cover it. And what insurance doesn't cover, thank goodness that we have the resources, and we can find the resources to get it, right? So, I feel for these parents who are so gripped with fear that they cannot let their children go. But the more we do that, the more we choke the life out of them. And
it's a way of not being in the present. Just as you were saying, do you want to, what is that quote that keeps coming up, that my life was filled with terrifying events, some of which actually happened, because it's just people, so terrified of what might eventually occur. And they spend their whole lives terrified instead of spending their whole lives living. And it's that constant choice, as you said, of no, I'm deciding to do this another way. I'm deciding to empower my children to trust them and the universe, or whatever deity, God, energy that you might feel connected to in some way, and know that you make the best decisions that you can at the time with the information that you have. And then you revise those and give your daughter as much power as she can have, both of them, as much power as they can have.
Yeah. And it's interesting, as we're talking about this, and you talked about the dads and how that plays in as well. And one of the things that actually blessedly forced me into really empowering Avery as well was, she spends about half her time at her dad's, and he's a deep sleeper, deep sleeper. And so one of the first things that we had was this thing called a Dexcom, which is, and it has like a remote, like you can check it on your phone. So even if she was at school, I'd know how her numbers were trending, which was a huge comfort. So if you have a type 1 child and you don't have a Dexcom, it's a piece, of peace that you can't really replace. And so she'd be over at his place, and I would see her. I'd get the alarm that she was low, and she's over at his place. And so I'm calling him, or you first text him, "Hey, are you checking Avery?" And I'm not getting a response back. And then calling him, and like having this inner panic of like, I see her trending down. Like her blood sugar says she's 50 and she's sleeping. Like, you've got to wake up. And so we had a couple of those instances, and I was just like, okay, how can we empower her? Because, and no fault of his own, and again, he's doing the best he could. He's managing not only 2 daughters, but also a small son, and, he's single, and, all of those other things, right? So trying my best not to be angry with him for sleeping hard. Like, how can we empower her? And so it's like, okay, we can put the Dexcom in her bedroom, and, put her meter in her bedroom. And at that point, she was capable of definitely checking her blood sugar at night. Like, what would you do if, you woke up and your blood sugar was low and you were so low that you couldn't walk? What would you do? How could you, yell, or what, I can wake up Annika. They share a bedroom over at his place. Yes, you could totally do that. Right. So we started to go, if we were in a situation where you couldn't, and they were real, which was great. What would you do? Oh, I could keep a juice box at my bedside. Yes, you could. Right. So that, we're starting to kind of set her up with the what ifs. And so that, while it was scary in the moment, and there was, 3 or 4 times where that happened, was really truly a blessing in disguise, because it allowed us to take that fear and go, okay, how can we know that we can go to sleep and everything's going to be okay? How can we set that up? And so, there was, of course, lots of conversations between their dad and myself and my husband. And, and it was really the beautiful how it emerged. And all the while keeping the focus on, what's best for her, because it would be really easy. And I've done this. So like, I am certainly no saint where I've blamed him. Like, you did this, you're not taking responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. And the fact of the matter is that he's doing the best he can. And, he's learning too. And like, I've slept through the alarm before where my husband has woken up, right? So who the heck am I to throw stones at him? He doesn't have a wife sleeping by him that's a lighter sleeper, right? So recognizing that some of these mistakes are mistakes that we could all make. And so having to get myself back off the ledge of blaming and criticism and back onto, okay, all right, what's really the goal? How can we keep her safe? So yeah, there's been some of those moments too.
So in the midst of all of this, you've had lots of life changes, lots of choices, lots of opportunities for learning, as we like to talk about them in our house. Where do you get your mama fuel?
That's a great question. Well, I have a very futuristic mindset. And so I'm always thinking about, like the people they are now, but the people they are going to be and who they are going to impact. So when I look at my girls, I just see possibility. And so that fuels me. I know that I have to fuel myself and I have to fill my cup. And over time, I've actually been willing to do that. In fact, I was just talking to somebody and sharing with them the conversation I just had with the kids. And her jaw dropped and she's like, whoa, you probably get a lot of criticism for that. I'm like, well, I've not really shared it out loud. So I'm going to share it with you, your audience, and we'll see how many jaws drop. But I truly put myself first. And so we just sat down. One of my big goals for this year is walking on stage as a figure bodybuilder in October. I competed in a bodybuilding competition last year, and this year I want to prep better so that I can win. Like I for me personally, I want to get on stage and I want to win. So I have to do the prep for that. And I'm also in the midst of writing this book, and those are both personal passion projects, right? They're not creating revenue for my business. The book might, and certainly I could leverage, you can do hard things and the goals and blah, 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 blah for walking on stage. I could leverage those things for my business, but they are not driving revenue. So those things get to happen before 9 a.m. And in order for that to happen, I have to be up at 4 a.m. I have to be. Otherwise, I cannot do I can't do those things before 9 a.m. And so, and if I decide that I need sleep more than I need the workout, then I lose that opportunity for the day. So if I'm going to be up at 4 a.m., that means I need to be in bed at 8 because my body needs 8 hours of sleep and I need to honor that. And so, I've been trying to shift and move and do it on less sleep and et cetera, et cetera. And I just had this, like, you know what? It's not working. It's not working. So I sat down with the girls last week and I said, look, girls, I want to walk on stage in October. The goal launch date for the book is September 30th. So in order for that to happen, from here till there, I have to be in bed by 8 p.m. every night. And both of them, started to tear up and they're like, but when are we going to have time to spend together and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, we're going to need to be more intentional. And you're right, we will be. And we can do that if we're intentional. We can carve out the time. And Annika specifically was really upset with me. Her love language is quality time. And so she was mad. She's like, great, so I'm never going to see you and, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, well, you're going to see less of me. But here's the deal, is that this goal is important to me. And so I'm going to do it because I need to put myself first so that I can show up for you guys. I'm not willing to put these goals to the side for someday. And they get it, right? Because and here's the logic behind it. Is not from a selfish point of view, but is from a modeling point of view. I have to do what fills my cup so that I can be the best for them. And if I don't model that for them, if I only model service, whatever you guys need, I'm pushing everything aside for you, what it models to them is that they need to behave in the same way when they're adults. And so, yeah, they know that this is something mom is going to do because A, I'm determined, and B, this is something that's important for me. And it's also okay for them to do the same. Yes, we do it in conversation. And yes, we're having to be really intentional and creative about where do we get our one-on-one time together. But at the same time, they know that this isn't really a negotiable. The details around it are negotiable, but the goal is not. And how I fill my cup is not. And so I wish that for other moms, that they would be willing to step into what feels like selfishness often, right? To step into those goals and step into what you want to do so that you can show up the best for your kids and also model for them. It's important to fill your cup first because you cannot serve from an empty cup.
Amen, sister. And it also is something that reminds me of what I've been reading a lot recently, which is that you cannot achieve your goals. You cannot get to the places you want to get. You cannot live the experiences that you want to live that are different from those you're living now if you're not willing to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And so when you're saying to your kids and your husband, look, this really matters to me, and I'm going to go to bed at 8. And yes, that means I'm unavailable. And yes, it means I'm going to ask you to be quiet in the house so that I can sleep. And I'm going to get up at 4 so that I can do these things and still show up in my business and still show up and, have dinner with you and still go to your gymnastics competitions or whatever else is going on. Mm-hmm. And it's for a finite amount of time. From now to October, this is my commitment to me. This is my commitment to us as a family. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. It's not comfortable. It is hard. And at the same time, as you say, you're modeling to your kids, it's okay to do this. It doesn't make you a bad person if you have your own dreams and you want to follow them. Like, why is it okay we have this this double standard of it's okay for our kids to have their dreams and we'll do all the things that we need to do to take them to gymnastics and writing lessons and guitar classes and all the things, and we'll stress ourselves. I do this a lot and I'm pulling back from it right now, of stressing myself a lot to get my kids to all the appointments and all the doctors and all the therapists and all the things that they need around, support and learning and fun and play dates and all the things. And what happens is that my priorities get squished and then I get resentful and frustrated, and it comes in waves. So right now I'm coming out of a wave of that. And it requires me to say, you know what? Yeah, I know you don't like this. And this is what's happening. So it's okay. You have all your feelings. I'm here. I love you. We're going to do this thing together. And this is okay. And it's also okay, by the way, for you to have the things you want to do, which means that I'm not going to get to spend as much time with you because I know we're going to connect and we're going to be okay. So praise to you. Amen for all of that, because it's going against the culture and it's going against what we've been taught, and it needs to happen, especially for our girls, because I definitely integrated, and so many of us in our generation, I think, integrated this message that we can have it all at the same time. Oh, and by the way, we also need to be subservient to the needs of all of the people in our family, because that's what makes us good mothers and good partners and good wives and good employees and good whatever. Well, and it's not sustainable.
Like I could just talk about this forever, but the girls' gymnastics.
We'll have you come back.
Is 30 minutes from our home, and they work out at different times. But they both work out 5 days a week, but they work out at different times. So we're driving a lot, and it's not inexpensive,
for sure,
as well. And so the girls, they know that, and so they would apologize for it. Avery especially tends towards guilt. And I always tell her, look, your job isn't guilt, it's gratitude. Like, we are happy to empower your dreams. As long as you show up and you work, your hardest, etc. But your job isn't guilt, it's gratitude. So as soon as you start to feel guilty about, this is all, just say, hey, thanks for supporting this. Right. So it's it's the nuance and changing that so that we're not performing out of guilt, but out of a place of abundance and gratitude. And again, that's one of those things that I'm trying to model with, I'm going after this dream, and there's going to be sacrifice from all of us to be able to make that happen. It means that I'm not going to be staying up until 9:30 or 10 o'clock and, helping with homework at those later hours. And this, of course, was a conversation with my amazingly supportive husband as well, that, after 8, like he's taking on the responsibility of getting them to bed and helping them with homework and that kind of thing. So, there is other tactical things that we have to work out if I'm going to do this, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. And so showing them that, yeah, I'm sacrificing, but I'm doing it out of a place of this is the right goal for me right now. And also thank you for being supportive, not guilt over, I'm so sorry that I can't be there for you after 8 or, blah, 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 blah. It's comes from a place of working truly together and coming from a place of gratitude. And I think that's another thing that I think is so difficult. I grew up in a home where guilt trips were used all the time, and unconsciously. And I think most of the time they're used unconsciously, like, oh, if you only knew how hard it was when I was a kid, you got it easy. Like we're instilling this guilt in our kids. And I wanted the opposite of that. And so I don't know how I'm doing. Like, I'll find out when they're 30, if they felt a lot of guilt. So, but I sure hope that they don't, what they feel is just gratitude. And so I always talk to them about paying it forward. Like someday you're going to have kids and just pay that forward. Like, we're here to help and support and get you guys to your goals. I don't want you to feel guilty. But I can never repay you. You're right. You can't. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. So I signed up to be your mama, and that's right. That's right. I signed up for.
And that's part of the deal, is that you'll never be able to repay me. However, you can pay it forward.
Alissa, I love that idea of paying it forward and of knowing and seeing the potential in your kids and giving them the grace of being able to be grateful instead of guilty. And I cannot wait to hear how it goes for you in October and to share in the community when you have stepped onto that stage and won, and when you have published your book. So thank you so much for being my guest today. I will get all of the different contact ways that people can reach you from you and put that in the show notes. And I will wish you an amazing day over in Minnesota.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was such an awesome conversation. I really appreciate you providing this space.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being my guest. We'll talk soon.
That's it for this episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. To join the virtual village, go to www.mamafuel.me/Facebook. That's MAMAFUEL.me/Facebook. And be sure to say hi when you get there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little mama fuel, and let's face it, we all have times when we're running on fumes, I'd love you to share this episode and to rate it and leave a review. The algorithms work that way. The more reviews there are and the more sharing there is, the more mamas will be able to feel encouraged and supported with the conversations that you just listened to in MamaFuel. Every comment helps, and it's always a super delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.